before we get to the PX section. So, but the cricket one may take longer. I don't know. If we could go back to the finance question around the what was it? The Mount Pleasant Memorial. Yeah.
So with respect to paragraph 4.2 on page 208,
yep.
I can confirm some of the details around the insurance there. $731,000 has been received as an indemnity payment. So that's been paid already. One amount came to us and was passed on. The second amount went directly to the body. There's a further $748,811 to come, and that is paid across as the building is constructed. So right. We've got the indemnity payment, and the 748 will come further as it is required.
So that is confirmed. The 1.497.
That is confirmed. That 1.497 is fine.
All right. So, but yeah.
Before we go into the Mount Pleasant one, it's going to be the same question around the insurance money. This is Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, this is Mount Pleasant.
I thought we're back on the other one, which
no. So, are there any other questions? Yep.
So given that council insured this building on behalf of the group, and given that there's a huge shortfall to what it actually costs to rebuild, and they're kind of rebuilding to a lesser standard than what they had before, can you advise why the staff recommendation in the report is only 100,000 rather than an adequate amount for them to actually do the building? Given that it was our lack of valuations.
It probably isn't for Peter to answer. No. Lincoln was here before. I don't know where he's gone. Yeah. I mean, it isn't for Peter to answer. No. He wouldn't have prepared this report. It's a different section.
Clarify, and it's probably it would have been better to the delegation, but in terms of this 100,000, it still leaves them $300,000 short. Are they able to get on and meet the requirement for the start date and the end date that Derek McCulloch mentioned in his submission with just 100,000?
They have got funds already. They've got $652,000 in the bank.
Yeah, no, I see that.
So they're good to go.
So is that their view, that they can actually do it with just 100,000?
100,000 extra.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, to start the process. Yeah.
they basically said that they could actually start building. They would have to just mitigate some of the internal fit out and do that down the track. So I think that was the message that I heard.
I mean, what I suggested to them, if you have a look at the contingency and price escalation, actually, if they can get a fixed price right now, they should actually be able to come in under that budget. So that's something they could explore.
Yes.
I think they have actually been exploring many options to reduce the cost. I think there is a nervousness about proceeding on a project with having such a significant gap. And, you know, again, this has taken a long time to come in front of council, which has meant that, you know, the costs have been rising. But, you know, I just know from Paul and I going to their AGM that they are quite disappointed in the amount that's been recommended given the shortfall, based primarily on the fact that the valuation through the insurance was a lot less than the actual cost of rebuilding. So, you know, I think I personally would like to move that we give an additional 100,000. If you look at some of the grants that we've paid out, for example, things like the loons, which we didn't insure, 250,000 into Littleton. This ideally should have been funded through the Betterment and Improvement Infrastructure Allowance. That was the reason that it was set up, was to cover some of the funding shortfalls through insurance. Clearly this is a position they're in because of our issues as a council, and you know, I think just giving a little bit more of a financial contribution to get this project happening is really important. I do worry that if we don't give extra funding, that we will see that the external funding will disappear, and also that if it does go ahead, it goes ahead in a very limited capacity, which means it actually costs a lot more in the long run to come back and fix later on.
Paul?
Yeah, I'd like to second that. And I think we just got to look at the history of the Mount Pleasant Association. 60 years. They've shown prudency over those 60 years. They had a building they built themselves and have looked after it in that period of time. And this is more of a hand up rather than a hand up. I see that they've actually putting a lot of their own money into it. And I think that this would actually send a really positive message out to the community that's been hit very, very hard and continues to get hit.
David?
Thank you. Just looking at the costings that the group provided and the costings in the report itself, we had a variation, but the one thing that does concern me a little bit with rebuilding of community facilities and public facilities, well, mainly community facilities, is the amount that we actually charge for consents, resource consents and building consents. We're actually, here's a community group rebuilding, and the report itself outlines an estimation of $50,000 for the pair of them. The applicants in their report earlier have indicated $63,250 for resource consent and building consent, and I think we actually hook it into our community groups in a big way for these fees and charges. And I can speak from experience with a very mediocre project that I did with a surf club a few years ago. The total project was $10,000 and we got $4,000 worth of consenting fees. And I think for community organisations, this council needs to look very hard at what it's charging not-for-profit organisations for consenting. It's a huge cost for some of these people. There's almost $65,000 in this project. We're charging them for consenting, and I think that's absurd.
Tim?
To kind of meet in the middle, because I do think that this is a very strong community facility and it's very important to this community, that we would suggest, or I'd suggest that we increase to 200,000, but that would include, we would pick up the cost of both resource consent and building consent, so the actual cash change would be the difference. Would that be a happy medium for most?
Why don't we just say we'll waive all council fees?
Well, because they come from two separate funds, so one is income, generated for services rendered. The other comes from a welfare fund that has been contributed to by generous people, actually all around the country, who donated to get things on the move. I'm not unhappy that we make the full payment, recognising that 60 grand of it will go on consents and come back to the council that way. I agree with David, though. That's something we need to look at, though, is the whole question around resource consents and building consent, because in some respects perhaps it is a gentler way of supporting community organisations in a sort of rebuild environment to address that. But I don't think that we have the power to do that around the table based on the report that we've had, which is based on the Mayoral Relief Fund and the Christchurch Earthquake Mayoral Relief Fund, and I would be happy to see the amount increase to the $200,000. So I would be happy to. I'll be voting for the amendment. Jimmy?
When the Christchurch Earthquake Mayoral Relief Fund established, up to now, the remaining balance is $1.9 million.
Yeah.
But if we back to the 2.5 years ago or 3 years ago, $7.6 million. So based on your understanding, still have some potential the community would like to apply for this funding or not? And what is your rationale? They apply for $430,000, but you grant the funding for $100,000. What's the rationale?
when we looked at the fund, we had, as you say, 7.6 million. There's been a number of expenditure over the last 3 years. So 1.94, when we looked at that balance, the $431,000 request at that point would take about a quarter of that fund out, so it would leave quite a significant amount less for other groups to come through to. So groups who are still suffering from earthquake issues can come to the fund still. That was one of the reasons, was that 25% was quite a large chunk to put out at this point in time on one application, and you'll see the schedule there on some of the other amounts that we've put through in the last 3 years.
Yeah, I think that the thing is that it's not actually a percentage of what remains, it's the percentage overall. And we spent $300,000 on the Central City Plan, $300,000 on the Isaac Theatre Royal. And in terms of this community, I actually fully accept the argument around this community. It's been hammered. They have done an amazing job getting that up and running with their temporary facility there. I've been there, others have been there, and it's extraordinary how they've brought 17 different user groups together to actually make that community really, really hum. And if we're talking about resilient communities, which I do love to talk about, we are totally looking at a resilient community. So I'm going to put the amendment. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That is carried. So now we put it is in fact the full resolution, isn't it? Because it was moved as a full resolution. So there we go. So now we've got one more item.